My wife claimed she was at her mother's house. Her mother called looking for her. The most devastating lies are often the simplest ones. They don't require elaborate planning or complex cover stories. Sometimes the most effective deception is just claiming to be somewhere mundane and believable, somewhere no one would ever think to question. When your spouse says they're visiting their parents, it seems so innocent and routine that you never consider it might be a lie. But when that innocent claim becomes the foundation for months of systematic deception, betrayal cuts deeper than any elaborate scheme ever could. Trust in marriage is built on 1,000 small assumptions. You assume that when your wife says she's going to her mother's house, that's where she's actually going. You assume that family visits are exactly what they appear to be, time spent maintaining important relationships and supporting aging parents. When those assumptions are shattered by a single phone call, everything you thought you knew about your marriage crumbles in an instant. I'm James, 34 years old, and I work as a software engineer for a tech startup in Austin. My wife Lisa and I have been married for 6 years, together for 8. She's a 32-year-old nurse at the local hospital, and we've built what I thought was a solid, trusting relationship based on open communication and mutual support. We own a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, have 2 cats, and had been talking seriously about starting a family within the next year or 2. Lisa's mother, Patricia, lives about 40 minutes away in a senior living community. She's 68 years old, recently widowed after losing Lisa's father to cancer 2 years ago, and has been struggling with loneliness and depression since his passing. Lisa has always been close to her mother, and after her father died, she made it a priority to visit Patricia regularly to provide emotional support and help with practical matters. For the past 4 months, Lisa had been visiting her mother every Tuesday and Thursday evening after work, plus most Saturday afternoons. It seemed like a reasonable schedule, frequent enough to provide meaningful support but not so intensive that it dominated our entire lives. I admired Lisa's dedication to her mother during this difficult period and never questioned the time she spent providing comfort and companionship. "Mom's really struggling today," Lisa would often say when she came home from these visits. "She's still having such a hard time accepting that Dad's gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only thing keeping her going." These conversations always made me feel grateful that Lisa was such a caring daughter and supportive of her doing whatever was necessary to help Patricia through her grief. The routine was predictable and comforting in its consistency. Lisa would finish her shift at the hospital, drive to her mother's apartment, spend 2 to 3 hours visiting, and return home by 8 or 9 o'clock. She'd usually bring dinner for Patricia or help with grocery shopping, cleaning, or organizing medications. Sometimes she'd call me from her mother's place to let me know she was running late or to ask if I needed anything from the store on her way home. I never had any reason to question these visits. Patricia was genuinely struggling with widowhood, Lisa was genuinely devoted to helping her mother, and the time frame was completely reasonable for family visits. When Lisa came home tired or emotionally drained from dealing with her mother's depression, it seemed like a natural consequence of providing support to a grieving parent. But last Tuesday evening, everything changed with a single phone call that destroyed the foundation of trust our marriage was built on. I was at home around 7:30, making dinner and expecting Lisa to return from her mother's house within the next hour. We'd planned to watch a movie together and discuss our weekend plans, so I was preparing something quick that could be reheated when she got home. It had been a typical Tuesday. I'd worked from home, had a few virtual meetings, and was looking forward to a quiet evening together. My phone rang, and I saw Patricia's name on the caller ID. This was unusual but not alarming. Lisa's mother occasionally called our house phone or my cell phone if she couldn't reach Lisa directly or if she needed help with something technical. I figured she might be having trouble with her television or computer and wanted assistance that Lisa wasn't able to provide in person. "Hi Patricia," I answered cheerfully. "How are you doing tonight?" "Oh, James, I'm fine, dear," she said, her voice carrying that slightly uncertain tone that had become common since her husband's death. "I was just wondering, have you heard from Lisa today? I've been trying to call her all afternoon but she's not answering her phone." The question confused me immediately. According to Lisa's schedule, she should have been at Patricia's apartment at that very moment. They should have been having dinner together or watching television or organizing Patricia's medications, whatever their usual Tuesday evening routine involved. "She should be with you right now," I said, feeling the first stirring of anxiety in my chest. "She left for your place after work like she always does on Tuesdays. Isn't she there?" The silence on the other end of the phone lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was filled with confusion and concern. "No, sweetheart, she's not here. I haven't seen Lisa since last Saturday when she helped me with grocery shopping. I thought maybe her schedule had changed at the hospital or something had come up, but when I couldn't reach her on her phone, I got worried." My world tilted on its axis. Lisa had left for her mother's house 3 hours earlier, just like she did every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 4 months. She'd kissed me goodbye, told me she'd see me later that evening, and driven away in her Honda Civic with a container of leftover soup for Patricia's dinner. But she wasn't at her mother's house. She'd never arrived. Patricia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady while my mind raced through possible explanations. When was the last time Lisa actually visited you? Well, let me think, Patricia said, and I could hear her struggling to remember specific dates. She was here Saturday afternoon, like I mentioned. Before that, I think it was last Thursday, or maybe the Thursday before that. I'm sorry, James, my memory isn't what it used to be, and the days tend to blur together. A cold realization began to settle in my stomach. If Patricia couldn't remember Lisa's recent visits with any certainty, and if Lisa wasn't currently at her mother's house despite claiming to be there, then how many of those Tuesday and Thursday evening visits had actually happened? Patricia, I need to ask you something important, I said, trying to remain calm for her sake while my marriage appeared to be crumbling around me. Over the past few months, how often has Lisa actually been visiting you? I know your memory has been affected by grief, but try to think about it carefully. There was a long pause while Patricia considered the question. When she spoke again, her voice was small and uncertain. James, I don't think she's been coming as often as she used to. I know she's busy with work in her own life, and I don't want to be a burden, but I've been feeling quite lonely lately. I thought maybe I was just forgetting when she'd been here, but now that you're asking directly, I'm not sure she's been visiting as regularly as I expected. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. For months, Lisa had been leaving our house 2 or 3 times per week, claiming to visit her grieving mother, but she'd apparently been going somewhere else entirely. While I'd been admiring her dedication to family and supporting her efforts to help Patricia through a difficult period, she'd been systematically lying about her whereabouts and activities. Patricia, I need to go, but I want you to know that this has nothing to do with you, I said, trying to end the conversation before my emotions became too overwhelming to hide. Lisa should be visiting you more often, and I'm going to make sure that happens. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Is everything alright, dear? Patricia asked, her voice filled with maternal concern despite her own confusion about the situation. Everything's going to be fine, I lied, knowing that nothing would be fine ever again. I love you, Patricia. Talk to you soon. I hung up the phone and sat in our kitchen, staring at the dinner I'd been preparing for my wife, who wasn't where she claimed to be and apparently hadn't been where she claimed to be for months. The betrayal was devastating not just because of the lying, but because of what the lies revealed about Lisa's character and priorities. She'd been using her mother's grief and loneliness as cover for her own deception, allowing an elderly widow to feel abandoned while she pursued whatever activities she was actually engaged in. 20 minutes later, I heard Lisa's key in the front door. She walked into the kitchen with the same tired expression she always wore after allegedly spending hours providing emotional support to her grieving mother. Hey babe, she said, setting down her purse and the empty soup container. Mom was having a particularly rough evening. She kept talking about Dad and how much she misses him. It's so heartbreaking to see her struggling like this. I watched her perform this elaborate charade, talking about conversations that never happened and emotions she hadn't witnessed, while maintaining the perfect expression of someone who'd spent the evening caring for a depressed parent. How is Patricia doing? I asked, my voice carefully neutral as I gave her an opportunity to tell the truth. She's hanging in there, but some days are harder than others, Lisa continued, settling into her usual post-visit routine. I think the evenings are the worst for her because that's when she and Dad used to watch television together. She gets so lonely. Every word was a lie. Every detail was fabricated. Every expression of concern was a performance designed to maintain her deception while making me feel grateful for her compassion and family dedication. That's interesting, I said, still maintaining my calm exterior, because Patricia called here about an hour ago looking for you. She said she hadn't seen you since Saturday and couldn't reach you on your phone. The change in Lisa's expression was immediate and devastating. The color drained from her face, her eyes widened with panic, and her carefully constructed story collapsed in an instant. She opened her mouth to speak but no words came out. There was no innocent explanation for what I'd discovered, no reasonable excuse that could make this situation anything other than what it obviously was. James, she finally managed to say, her voice shaking as she tried to form some kind of response that might minimize the damage of being caught in such an elaborate lie. I can explain this. Explain what? I asked, standing up from the kitchen table and looking directly at her. Explain that you've been lying to me for months about where you spend your Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Explain that you've been using your mother's depression and loneliness as cover for whatever you're actually doing. Explain that I've been supporting and admiring your dedication to family while you've been systematically deceiving me. She tried to speak again, but I held up my hand to stop her. Before you say anything else, I continued, I want you to know that I called Patricia back after we hung up. I told her I was concerned about your safety because you'd left to visit her but never arrived. She's worried sick about you right now, thinking something terrible might have happened. So whatever explanation you're about to give me, remember that your lies aren't just hurting me, they're hurting your mother too. Lisa sank into one of our kitchen chairs, her entire body language shifting from defensive to defeated. The elaborate performance was over, and she was finally faced with the consequences of months of systematic deception. I've been seeing someone, she whispered, the words barely audible but completely clear in their meaning. The affair confession was devastating but not surprising. The pattern of lies, the regular schedule of absences, the emotional distance I'd attributed to stress from caring for her mother, it all made perfect sense now. Lisa had been having an affair, using her mother's grief as the perfect alibi because it was unquestionable and sympathetic. How long? I asked, though I already knew the answer based on when her visiting schedule had become so regular and intensive. 4 months, she said without looking up from the table. 4 months of systematic lying. 4 months of elaborate performances every Tuesday and Thursday evening. 4 months of me admiring her compassion and family dedication while she was cheating on our marriage and using her mother's pain as cover for her betrayal. Who? I asked, though I wasn't sure I actually wanted to know the answer. Dr. Martinez from the hospital, she said. We started talking during coffee breaks, and then meeting for drinks after work, and then she trailed off, unable or unwilling to provide more details about how her emotional affair had developed into a physical relationship. The revelation that her affair partner was a colleague made the deception even more calculated. She'd been working with this person every day, seeing me every evening, and maintaining the pretense of being a devoted wife and daughter while systematically betraying both relationships. So every Tuesday and Thursday when you told me you were caring for your grieving mother, you were actually having an affair, I said, needing to hear the full truth stated clearly and unambiguously. Yes, she whispered, and you let Patricia think you were visiting her regularly while she was actually sitting alone in her apartment feeling abandoned and forgotten. Yes, and you came home every night and told me stories about conversations you'd had with your mother, about her emotional struggles, about how much she needed your support. All of it lies. Yes, the confession was complete, but it didn't provide any relief or closure. If anything, knowing the full extent of Lisa's deception made the betrayal feel even worse. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single mistake that had spiraled out of control. This was months of calculated lying, elaborate performance, and systematic exploitation of both my trust and her mother's grief. I need you to call Patricia right now and tell her you're safe, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. She's worried about you because I told her you'd left to visit her but never arrived. After you reassure her that you're okay, I want you to pack your things and leave. James, please, Lisa said, finally looking up at me with tears in her eyes. We can work through this. I made a terrible mistake, but we can go to counseling, we can rebuild our trust. I love you, and I want to save our marriage. But love doesn't systematically lie to someone for months. Love doesn't use a grieving parent as an alibi for betrayal. Love doesn't come home every evening and perform elaborate charades while maintaining an affair with a coworker. You don't get to use your mother's depression as cover for cheating on me and then claim you want to work on our marriage, I said. You don't get to lie to my face for 4 months and then ask me to trust you again. And you definitely don't get to let your widowed mother think you're neglecting her while you're actually neglecting her to have an affair. Lisa called Patricia and had a brief, difficult conversation in which she confirmed she was safe but couldn't provide a reasonable explanation for why she hadn't been visiting as promised. I could hear Patricia's confused and hurt voice through the phone, asking why Lisa had been lying about her visits and whether she'd done something to upset her daughter. After hanging up, Lisa looked at me with desperation in her eyes. What about Patricia? She needs support right now. She can't handle being alone. Patricia needed support 4 months ago when you decided to use her grief as an excuse for your affair, I replied. You made the choice to prioritize your relationship with Dr. Martinez over your responsibilities to both your marriage and your mother. Those are consequences you'll have to live with. Lisa packed 2 suitcases with essential items and left that night to stay with a friend from work. The next morning, I called Patricia and had a long, honest conversation about what had happened. I apologized for Lisa's deception and assured her that her daughter's lies had nothing to do with Patricia's worth or needs. I don't understand how she could lie about visiting me, Patricia said, her voice filled with hurt and confusion. I thought maybe I was being too demanding or needy, but I never asked her to lie about it. I arranged to visit Patricia myself that weekend and helped connect her with some community resources for widowed seniors, including social groups and support services that could provide the companionship and assistance she needed. It wasn't my responsibility to clean up the damage Lisa's lies had caused, but Patricia was family, and she deserved better than being used as an alibi for an affair. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. Lisa didn't contest anything, perhaps because she understood that using her mother's grief as cover for an affair made her position morally indefensible. We divided our assets, sold the house, and legally ended our 6-year marriage within 4 months of that devastating phone call from Patricia. 6 months after our divorce, I heard through mutual friends that Lisa's relationship with Dr. Martinez had ended badly. Apparently, when their affair was no longer secret and exciting, they discovered they didn't actually have much in common beyond physical attraction and the thrill of deception. Lisa had destroyed her marriage for a relationship that lasted less than a year total. More importantly, I learned that Patricia had joined a senior center social group and was doing much better emotionally. She'd made several friends, started participating in community activities, and was beginning to rebuild her life after losing her husband. It turned out that what she'd needed wasn't necessarily more visits from Lisa, but consistent, honest support and connection to peers who understood her situation. I maintain a relationship with Patricia to this day. She's essentially my former mother-in-law, but she was family for 6 years, and I care about her well-being regardless of what happened with Lisa. We have lunch once a month, and I help her with technology issues and home maintenance projects. She's never asked me to forgive Lisa or suggested that I should have given the marriage another chance. I think she understands that some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Looking back on this experience, I've learned that the simplest lies are often the most devastating because they exploit our basic assumptions about trust and family relationships. Lisa could have claimed to be working late or meeting friends for drinks, and I might have eventually become suspicious. But claiming to visit her grieving mother was the perfect lie because it was unquestionable, sympathetic, and seemingly selfless. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about the systematic exploitation of her mother's pain, the elaborate performances she put on every evening, and the way she used my admiration for her family dedication against me. She turned my respect for her compassion into a weapon that enabled her deception. I'm in a relationship now with someone who values honesty and direct communication above everything else. We've talked extensively about what happened in my previous marriage, and she understands why transparency is so important to me. When she says she's going somewhere, I trust that's where she's actually going, not because I'm naive, but because we've built a relationship where truth is more valuable than convenience. The most important lesson I learned is that trust in a relationship isn't just about sexual fidelity, it's about honesty in all the small, daily interactions that make up a shared life. When someone can lie to your face for months while performing concern for family members they're actually neglecting, they've demonstrated a fundamental lack of integrity that extends far beyond just romantic betrayal. That phone call from Patricia changed everything in my life, but it also revealed the truth about who Lisa really was and what our marriage had actually become. Sometimes the most devastating discoveries are also the most necessary ones, freeing you from relationships built on lies and allowing you to find connections based on genuine trust and mutual respect.